Managing a small team or business comes with a unique set of challenges. With limited resources and manpower, it's easy for things to feel chaotic and out of your control. How can you, as a leader, accomplish your goals while keeping your team engaged, effective, and accountable? This podcast will give you practical strategies you can implement now to lead your team or business to reach its fullest potential. Welcome to the Organizing Chaos podcast with your host, Danny Coleman.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Organizing Chaos, where we talk about small, practical strategies for small teams and small businesses. So today I have a very special guest, my buddy, John Meese. John, say hello.
Hello.
John and I had a podcast actually about 2 years ago where we talked about how you could monetize your blog. It was actually my first, I think it was probably my first published content, really, was co-hosting that with you. Which was a blast and probably honestly had a big impact on the fact that this show exists. And I realized podcasting isn't as scary as I might have thought of at one time. But yeah, anyways, thank you so much for being here, coming over, and being on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure, Danny. Thank you for having me. And it's good. It's good to have a little deja vu flashback. Missed the podcast days when we co-hosted that. So this is fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. So tell us a little bit about what you do right now, and then we'll talk a little bit about more like how you got there.
Sure. Well, formally, I'm the Dean of Platform University. But what I usually say is that I am a blogger who blogs about blogging to help people blog, for people who want to blog.
That's good.
Yeah. So that's basically what I do. It's very meta.
So it's Platform University,
yes.
Right? With Michael Hyatt.
Yes. So,
right?
Yeah, sure, I should clarify. Michael Hyatt, who's a New York Times bestselling author, well-known public speaker, former CEO of Thomas Nelson. He started Platform University, actually just crossed the point where it was 6 years ago.
Wow.
As a membership site for people who want to build an online platform, a personal brand. There's a lot of different ways to call it, but platform was the term he was using at the time, coming from his book, Platform, Get Noticed in a Noisy World.
Yeah.
I was actually a student of Platform University. That's why I started a podcast and I started a blog and all of that, the podcast that we did together. And then just shy of 2 years ago, so about a year and a half ago, they approached me and asked me if I would come on and really spearhead Platform University. So it's not only a brand that's kind of spun off from Michael Hyatt's brand as a separate thing, but also it's treated, and we can talk more about this later, but it's treated as essentially a strategic business unit, whereas like I am an employee of Michael Hyatt and Company, but I'm essentially I run Platform University as if it is its own business within the bigger business.
Right, yeah.
So there's a lot of just unique, interesting opportunities and challenges there.
Yeah, for sure. And so that's only 6 years, right, that he's been doing this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably about 8 or 9 years since Michael first left Thomas Nelson.
Okay.
Well, he was the CEO, and he became the board chairman and helped manage the sale when Thomas Nelson was bought by HarperCollins. Okay. So currently, if you don't know, HarperCollins owns Thomas Nelson.
Okay.
They were at the time the 7th largest Christian publishing company in the world, and so he managed that whole process, and then he stayed on as the chairman, and that's when he started writing and speaking, and ultimately he was a public speaker full-time, writer full-time, and he thought that's all he was going to do. But he got tired of traveling pretty quickly. Yeah. You're doing 40 or 50 speaking engagements a year. I mean, you can imagine every weekend somewhere different. Yeah. With 5 daughters at home. And so that's when he started building this membership site, which became the cornerstone of the business. People pay a monthly fee to get access to training and a community inside. And then now we'll actually probably this year hit the Inc. 5000 list for the third time. So that's the list of the 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah, so fast growing, and 6 years for some businesses doesn't sound like a lot of time.
Right.
But for us, I mean, the whole industry's changed in that time. And now the bulk of the business that Michael's more involved with is we have a coaching program called Business Accelerator. We have courses called, Best You Ever and Free to Focus. We have other books that have come out since Platform. And that's really the bulk of the business right there. And I don't know how I forgot to mention it. It was only, several $1 million in revenue last year. But the Full Focus Planner, we also have a physical planner, which is it's essentially a productivity planner to guide your day. That last year ended up being, without giving away too many financials, that ended up being about a third of our company-wide revenue last year. And it was launched in June of the year before. And so it was as a physical product, a physical planner.
Yeah.
And I say launched in June, I mean sold in June, but we didn't actually ship them until the fall. And so last year was our first full year where we had the planner, and it was several $1 million in revenue.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that's a great example. So Michael Hyatt's a great example.
Yes.
Of kind of the path that you also kind of somewhat similarly took.
Yes.
In terms of, what you had, you were employed and whatnot. So like talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, kind of how you got to from where you were, where I know you were, and then to where you're at now with Michael Hyatt.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out where the best place to start is.
Start with Chick-fil-A.
Okay, good. That's good. Everyone loves that story. That from rags to riches. It's from Chick-fil-A to internet marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I worked at Chick-fil-A in high school, and then went off to college. Worked at Chick-fil-A a little bit, but mostly did other stuff like economics research center and things like that. Nerdy, Excel spreadsheet jobs. And then I worked for a campus ministry for a year out of college, and then I worked for Chick-fil-A as a training director, and that was the last job I had before the one I have now. I worked at the Chick-fil-A here in Columbia, actually. It was all in temporary. When I came to work at Chick-fil-A, this was now the third time I was coming back to Chick-fil-A. I had years of experience with them, but I came in saying, hey, I'm actually building my business on the side right now, but I would love to work here and help train your staff because I know everything Chick-fil-A wise. Like at this point, I was going through corporate training to be certified as a trainer. I could go to any franchise, or if I wanted, I could travel from store to store and train people. Which in Chick-fil-A world, that's like the dream. You can go, like, Chick-fil-A pays you to travel, and then you get to party and all that kind of stuff.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well,
except for on Sundays.
Well, it's just on Sundays because you work like 16-hour days during the Monday through Saturday at the grand openings, and then on Sundays everyone would go out. And so I was not really interested in that path. And to be clear, it's not like it's Christian partying.
Right, that's fine. Yeah,
sort of.
You're good.
A little bit, but not exclusively. So while I worked at Chick-fil-A, I started blogging on a regular basis. I didn't launch the podcast yet until later, but I started selling online courses, offering my own coaching and consulting services, and really established my own expertise online. First, I was really talking about, my tagline was turning complex into simple, which is not really a very clear tagline in hindsight. Like at the time I was like, it's simple, but it still was vague. It was like turning, like, what do you mean? Like turning.
I got it.
Well, good. I'm glad you got it. But I mean, that could mean
maybe
anything.
not everybody.
But I could have been talking about theology or productivity or technology, and I could have still turned the complex into simple.
Yeah.
And I did. At first I talked about all of those things. Theology, productivity, and technology.
Also carbohydrates, there's simple complex.
Yes, that's true. I do that. I turn complex carbohydrate. I don't know. Anyways, but so I was actually launching online courses about software tutorials because I found that I had a knack for teaching people how software works, and people really enjoyed the way I taught. So that's what I was doing first, but then I started writing blog posts just breaking down how I actually launched the course, how the course launched it. I would be really transparent with the revenue and all of that. And that content was way more popular than the actual launches themselves. So very quickly I realized that I just paid attention to my audience, that they really enjoyed the way that I taught essentially digital marketing. I mean, how do you launch a course? How do you build an audience and all that stuff? And so I started focusing more and more on that. Eventually my platform at johnmeese.com became all about build an online business in 30 minutes a day. And that was when we had the podcast, the Unleash Your Blog podcast, which you can still find anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's a little outdated, but it's still there. And then that was when, apparently I didn't know this, but Michael Hyatt was listening to our podcast.
Huh.
Yeah.
I know he listened to that first one.
Yeah. He
retweeted. That was pretty cool.
Oh, that's true. He did. He shared like our first episode. But him and there were some other executives at his company were watching and listening, and then they said, hey, can we take you out to lunch? We just want to talk about some ideas. And that idea became, what if you took what you're teaching in your blog, and instead of teaching it to, several hundred people or a couple thousand people, why don't you teach it to 100,000 people? I was like, okay, that sounds like a great idea. So, I mean, it was a longer process than that, but ultimately that's what led me to where I am now.
Word. So, so your entrepreneurship journey is, like everyone's, is unique. Mm-hmm. So you were employed, then you were self-employed, and then now you're employed again, technically employed.
Totally.
So as far as what I want to come back to rather though is audience, right? So you talked about audience, and I think that's what I want to jump into because I think that there's similarities between how you build an audience online and as well similar to rather like how you would build it in real life.
Yeah.
And so as far as a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, most of them aren't digital marketers.
Okay.
Which you are. I am a digital marketer in my spare time, or most of my time. This is my spare time. So you and I kind of know that world, but I've always thought that world has a lot to offer the physical world that maybe isn't online as much or as connected or whatever, reaching the whole world and stuff.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you think are important to building your audience? Because your audience, when we say your audience, by the way, this is the people who are going to buy from you, the people who are going to be listening to you, and the people who are going to be purchasing from you. So do you see some similarities maybe that we could bring from the digital world to the physical world as far as building a brand, building an audience?
Yes, definitely. I think, and in Platform University, we teach a lot of the fundamentals, which I'm happy to talk about. And we teach them and say up front, like, hey, this is built for online businesses, primarily even personal brands, even more specific than, internet marketing or, however you want to call it. But a lot of the principles hold true to just any kind of business. And really what it is that, it comes down to the core of business, which is that, personally, this is sort of a philosophical worldview. I believe that profit is the measure of how efficiently and effectively you are solving a real problem in the world.
That's very good. Can you give an example?
Yes. So, can you give me a business that, somebody in your audience owns, for example? Well, I guess we could talk about the one on the wall.
Yeah, we can talk about Mealtown Coffee.
Let's talk about Mealtown Coffee. So Mealtown Coffee's success, of course, for the owners, it's profit, right? That's, you're in business to make profit. That's why we don't call it a nonprofit. And if you do call it a nonprofit, that's a whole other problem. But, profit is a measure of success. But profit comes from a whole long process. The first thing you need to do is you identify a problem that needs to be solved. The problem that Mealtown solves, really, there's several facets to it. So Mealtown Coffee solves the problem that we'll use Donald Miller language here. The external problem is I need fuel. I need caffeine. I need something that's actually going to help get me through my day. That's my external problem. My internal problem is also, as a customer, is also that I'm looking for somewhere to feel like I belong, and I'm looking for community and connection. And so that's the internal part of the problem. The philosophical thing, that for Mealtown, they take the philosophical stance. I'm not sure how they would phrase it exactly, but essentially they take the philosophical approach that, I'm sorry, I'm like totally distracted.
It's fine. Yeah, my son is screaming downstairs. I don't know if you guys can hear that or not.
It's good. Dad.
He loves me.
That's good. That's a good problem to have. But the philosophical problem might be that you should be able to get coffee without knowing how to speak other languages, or just feeling like feeling dumb. Like, I know are the owners of Mealtown, like Chris, who's been on your podcast.
Yeah.
I've heard him use that language before. Like, you should be able to order coffee somewhere without feeling like an idiot because you don't know what a pour over is or anything like that. So the problem they're solving is that. But the two ways, profit is really two things. It's efficiency and it's effectiveness. The effectiveness is, really measured in revenue. Like, how effective are you in solving people's problems is measured by how your customers are buying your product, how many of them are coming to your business, whatever it may be. And your efficiency is managing your margins, your cost of goods, your other operating costs that lead to ultimately profit. So I know that's getting a little math, like philosophy and math kind of overlapping, but essentially business and marketing is all about identifying real problems people have, proposing a solution to it that is both efficient and effective. And that's really like the core. Of course, there's plenty of tactics you can talk about how to do that, but that's the mindset.
So let's talk a little bit about that and maybe give some more practical examples.
Yeah.
So that was good with Mealtown, what you identified there. As far as, like, how do you, and I have my thoughts on this, but I want to hear yours first.
Sure.
How do you cultivate that? How do you figure out who it is? Like, because so let me back up. Most people start business, especially brick and mortar businesses, are started like, hey, you know what? There's not in this town a coffee shop or a sandwich shop or whatever, and so people make it like that. And once you've created it, if you have something that's good, then people are coming. So you have enough to stay in business, right? You don't fall flat, within a few months. You're in business for a year or two. But now you're just trying to figure out how do you keep it consistent, right? Because it's like rain, or when it rains, it pours, or other times it's just like it's dry, no one's coming in.
Yeah.
So how do you cultivate those people who want to keep coming back and getting them loyal to your place of business?
Well, I think the first step is to get clear on who they are and what problem they have. Like the language I just used to describe Mealtown's customer, like what problem do they have that you're solving? What problem does your customer have that you can solve, and then make sure you're solving that problem well, and that you're reminding them on a regular basis that you can solve that problem. And so that usually means some sort of communication, whether it be social media or email or, a clever marquee outside the building, some way that you're communicating with your audience on a regular basis. I know for online markets, I don't know why this would be different for offline. For online markets, we recommend that you have at least one just focused touch point with your customers a week. And so that means usually sending an email and just letting them know, hey, here's what's up. Here's one way we can help you. Mm-hmm. And just making sure that they're just aware of the value which you can bring to them. What you want to be careful of is that you're not once a week reaching out and saying, hey, can you give me money? Which, sometimes when you're just saying like, hey, we've got a sale, or hey, we've got this new product, it can come across as like, give us your money. And the reality is you're communicating the same information. Like you're saying we have things to sell, but the framework, and this is about copywriting really. The framing, of how you present the information is really important. So having some kind of communication with your audience on a regular basis will bring consistency. Another thing is, I run the business unit that I run, Platform University, is primarily based on recurring revenue. Mm-hmm. And there is a huge, wide open door for recurring revenue in offline businesses that is almost never tapped. Can you imagine if, let's just say, a dry cleaner. So, I use a local dry cleaner called Fashion Fresh. And if they had some sort of set subscription that was like, hey, if you pay this much, then we'll have the premium version of dry cleaning, or we'll come to your house and pick it up, and we'll come bring it back when it's clean, and we'll put your dry cleaning on nice hangers instead of those like cheap like little wire things ones, that like fall apart, and you're like, why do I even have this? And we'll take off the plastic wraps, so you don't have to worry about that. Just like this little extra touch of saying like, hey, if you pay $50 a month, then plus then like you get all of this experience, like easy. Almost every business has an opportunity for recurring revenue, which they don't tap into. Recently, I've seen in some cities, and I don't think Elia does this, which is like the day spa on the square. But I've seen some cities and some companies who have like spa services will have a subscription where it's like, hey, if you pay $100 a month, then you can come in for a massage, or whenever you want, as long as you schedule it a week in advance or something like that.
Okay.
Just recurring revenue is a phenomenal way to stabilize your business, to make sure it's not seasonal. So that doesn't have to become 100% of your revenue, but the reality is that it's almost never thought of in offline businesses. It's just not, recurring revenue is just not usually even something people think about.
Can you think of a practical way for offline businesses right now, like brick and mortars, to figure out who exactly their audience is? Because it's hard to pin that down sometimes when you're a brick and mortar business, I think. No,
I think that's fair. I think online we kind of drowned in data. And we drown in data on a regular basis. And I think offline it's like the reverse problem. There's a lot of guesswork. The first thing I would say is that use empathy to your advantage. And so that means like taking a day and literally just sitting and watching your customers come in, watch them interact with your staff, talking to people and ask them like, hey, why do you come here? What do you enjoy about this place? Like, I'm the owner and I'm just really I want to learn how I can better serve you. And so I'm trying to understand my customers better. Yeah. And the reality is like, if you were a customer and the owner sat down and say, hey, like, what do you like about this place and how can I serve you better? Like, you would feel special, you'd feel honored, you'd feel important. Yeah, very much so. And so you'd be honest with them. Yeah. And so the reality is that's like step one. It's not, it doesn't have like statistical significance and all of that. But what it does is it has human significance of being able to sit down with someone and say, look at them in the eyes and really ask yourself, who is this person? And get to understand them. Yeah. If you do that enough, and that could mean that you have, you have 5 conversations with customers a week or 10. Yeah. If you do that enough, you start to get a pulse for kind of who these people are. And so sure, you could also do surveys. Like Mealtown actually is a good example. Just sent out a survey to all their customers to better understand them. Like, what are you looking for in a coffee shop? How often do you shop? Well, some things like how often people shop, you can actually determine that in whatever sales program you use. Right, yeah. But just talking to people is the best way to start. In fact, this is actually it is a strategy people use online as well. Like Pat Flynn is a great example. He runs a website called smartpassiveincome.com. He's got a massive audience. And as his audience has grown, he's kept the habit where once a month, it might be once a week, I think it's once a month, he basically picks a random person on his email list and reaches out to them and says, hey, can we jump on a video call? I'd love to just chat and learn more about you. And so he just, because this is on his calendar, it's like every month he's talking to a real life person on a video. People that you just email. Instead of emailing a couple 100,000 people, you get one on a call, and you do that enough and you start to see patterns. And it's just part of human relationships.
So, and that's great. That's a great tactic that I hope people take away from this, is just to have some conversations with your employee or with your customers and get some feedback from them. What do you think then we need to do with that feedback so that we actually do something with what we've learned?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is not all opinions are created equal. And it can be very tempting the first time you do this to like talk to one person and like you might say like, Danny, like, what do you think about this place? And Danny says, well, you might say like, well, you know, in general I like it, but like I wish the chairs were a little more comfortable. As a business owner, it's tempting to go like, tear all the chairs out, put new chairs in, you know. But the reality is that A, you don't know if that's a consistent feedback or if that's just one person, you know, until you've done this for a while. But B, there's also like, you have to decide what do you want your brand to be about and what investments you're willing, you know, like what investments you're willing to make for what outcome. And the reality is like, well, Mealtown's a great example actually. They don't have comfortable chairs at all. And they're okay with that because they're not a lounge, right? Like they're a place you come and get your coffee, hang out for a little bit and then go. Like, you know, and so it's actually in some ways it's a strategy for them to make sure they've got turned around and they're, I don't know.
I never thought about that.
Yeah. You don't want to be too comfortable if you're in like because they're in a 700 square foot, you know, space as a coffee shop.
It's pretty small.
So I know it's kind of a tangent, but I would say look for the patterns, but also, you know, I look for the people who are most engaged. If people give you like 1 or 2 word answers, that doesn't mean they don't care, but it may mean that they care less than someone goes, oh, I'm so glad you asked. I mean, the reality, you know, like someone who gives you this like deep, emotional, long answer, pay attention to that because those are your hyper respondent customers, the ones who are likely to become fans, you know, lifelong raving fans.
So it might be a little bit like okay, I guess, to lean on their opinion a bit more.
Totally.
If it's deep and thought out, simply because if nothing else, you're going to make them and anyone else who resonates with that really fanatic about it.
Totally. Although I would say I would still look for patterns. Like if you have one really kind of outlier who's like really passionate, they could just be one outlier who has a unique opinion, you know. And the other thing to consider, to keep in mind, is also that a lot of business owners, when they start their business, it's easy to think about, like, what do I want? You know, if I were to go to a coffee shop, what would I want? And that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the reality is that is helpful when you're just getting started if you can kind of think of yourself as the avatar or the ideal customer.
Yeah.
But at some point, it doesn't scale. You know, ultimately people find out that if their business becomes just a clone of their personality, that can actually exclude a lot of people. And so that's why I would say it's actually an exercise in putting aside your what you want, you know, unless you want to think about what paying customers want.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I see that too. And that's how I think everyone starts that way. Because like you think, wouldn't it be nice if fill in the blank?
That's how
then
most
you
businesses
make that.
start. Yeah.
And then it's like if you don't listen, then you don't know how to course correct. You're like, okay, now this is up. This ship is going. Now, where do we steer it?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where a lot of small businesses get stuck or get lost, if you will, if they're a ship without, you know, a waypoint, is that they just kind of float around. They're like, oh, let's go over here for a little bit. Oh, let's go over here for a little bit. But like, if you are asking for feedback from you know, the people who are frequenting your business, well, you're going to learn what you never could have known if you'd never built a business in the first place. You've now made a place where you're going to collect people. And then you just need to collect responses from there. So that's good. I mean, marketing is the biggest, the most consistent problem that people tell me, small businesses tell me, this is our problem. Marketing is like almost always number one. And I think that a lot of it has to do with, it seems like a very big, large, overwhelming thing to tackle. And to be sure, there are plenty of things you can do to market. But I think basics are what we talked about here now, which is get to know your customer, make it regular. You know, I think a lot of times people might do that. Like, oh, I did it once. You know, like make it a weekly thing. You know, like how you said Pat Flynn did. That's a great idea. Have it be blocked on your calendar. You're going to be, hey, this is the day I go into work and I don't go to the kitchen or I don't, you know, do financials or whatever. I talk to customers.
Yep.
And I think it also can be really encouraging. Just recently, the business that I have with my business partner, Brian, we started, or not just recently, I guess the past couple of weeks, we've been having a lot more just one-on-one interaction with people. And the conversations that we're having not only turn them into like lifelong fans, but it encourages us that like we're connecting, you know, or if we hadn't been, we figure out how we're not. And then by the end of the conversation, we've connected. And then we're like, man, yeah, we can do this. You know, you get encouraged by it too. I know we talked about this a lot, how isolating being an entrepreneur can be. Because you're different, you're trying to serve your customers, you know, you got a certain face you're trying to put on or whatever. And then around your employees, well, they're all doing things for you. But they don't have all the stress of what you have on you. So you can feel very siloed, and it can be a real discouragement sometimes. And I think one of the big things is like if you can talk more to your customers, you're actually going to get a lot more energy back. So
I love that. You mentioned a minute ago that marketing is one of the most common, I don't think you said problems or roadblocks or obstacles that people in your audience share. It would be helpful if I just shared a couple quick tips on that for offline.
Yeah.
So now in Platform University, we do teach there are 5 growth models. And I don't want to get that. We could spend a whole hour on that. But there are 2 that are the most applicable to offline businesses, I think, most quickly applicable. And they're essentially viral growth, which is also known as word of mouth growth, and paid growth. Now, paid growth is pretty straightforward. You pay for ads. That could be a billboard, a Facebook ad, a Google ad. How you're sponsoring some event, that would all fit under the category of paid growth.
Yeah.
Paid growth is only measured by the success of essentially whatever dollar you paid into the ad. Did you get an ROI? Did you get a return on your investment?
Right.
If you paid $5 for an ad, did you make at least $6? So that one's pretty straightforward. It's actually really complicated, but the theory is pretty straightforward. I think most people skip over the value of word of mouth marketing, which is how honestly most successful offline or brick and mortar businesses thrive.
Yeah.
And a lot of business owners, when they hear about it, they're like, well, yeah, I guess it's kind of beyond my control, right? You just hope people talk nice about you.
Right. Yeah.
But the reality is there's a lot of things you can do to actually make it easier for people to talk about you. If you have a clear brand, for example, or even a clear tagline, that's actually ammunition for your best customers to say, oh, yeah, you should go to this place because, whatever the tagline is or whatever your business is, like, oh, they're, let me just think of a good example.
We can just keep going with Muletown. I mean, it's
sure. I like Muletown. Yeah.
Good, simple coffee.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
it's good, simple coffee.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, we're the best coffee in town, or, whatever tagline they were to pick. Like, that's ammunition for your audience to talk about you. Another thing is that within word of mouth, of course, social media is kind of part of what's going on, right? People talk about you in social media.
Right.
But most business owners, when they think about marketing, honestly, most business owners spend far too much time worrying about social media. Social media, studies have shown, it almost never drives sales. It drives likes, engagements, comments, maybe some reviews, but it almost never drives actual sales. And the reality is that's what you're in business for money to change hands. Social media is very visible because it's communal, but most sales are coming from things like Google, even Google Maps or Yelp, other ways that people can actually find your business, reviews, and that kind of stuff. I would spend far more time focusing on the word of mouth that's going on in your review section on Yelp and Google than I would worrying about your Facebook page.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I was going to throw that in there just because, like, when you mention social media, I agree. I think it can be a trap. But if nothing else, pay attention to your reviews.
Yes.
Get a bad review. Don't freak out about it. Just respond and say, "Hey, and all anyone ever is going to see if they see that bad review, they're going to see your response. Don't fight them. That do not try to argue.
Oh, that'll make you look horrible.
If you just say, "Hey, we're really sorry you had a bad experience. There must have been miscommunication. Please come in sometime and I'll give you something free." People are going to be like, "Wow, that 1-star review actually ends up becoming a 5-star review pretty much because they see how you handle problems."
Exactly. No, I think when I'm looking at a business, especially a newer business if it has a bunch of reviews and they're exclusively 5-star reviews, then I'm like, I don't trust them. Basically, if they're exclusively 5-star reviews, I'm like, oh, so you haven't been around long enough. Because everybody has haters. Like, it's just like, if you're around long enough, you will have haters.
You got to have 4.5 stars.
Yeah, exactly.
On Amazon, you can't search for 5-star reviews. You can only go with 4 and up.
Yep. So, if you get if you get a 3-star, 2-star, 1-star review, then respond to it professionally. Remember that you're responding publicly. You're actually responding more for the benefit of everybody else.
Yeah.
It's less for the benefit of the person who actually gave you the review. Because often they're like, you can't help them. Like they're beyond, they got angry and they moved on. And so you should reply to them, but you're really replying to them so that everybody else can see that you care. So I would pay much more attention to your reviews than anything else, and things like your Google listing, making sure that people can find you easily, that there are photos of your menu and your hours are updated, all that kind of stuff. It blows my mind, how many businesses have been around for more than a year.
Oh yeah,
and like their hours aren't updated on Google. There's no photos of their building or their menu. You're like, you don't even have to have a fancy website. You don't have to have a website at all to have a good Google listing, but most
Yeah.
people are using Google Maps to find you and find information about you.
Well, that's the thing is, people might not know this, but like, when you're asking Siri where to, where to go for something or
Yep.
what's around here for breakfast or brunch or whatever, it's pulling data from Yelp.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ask Google, any Android device, my understanding is correct, they're pulling it from Google.
Yeah.
So those are definitely two places that you want to make sure that you're keeping updated just on this whole idea of marketing at its very basic level. Obviously, we're not going to talk about all of that right now, but I think we talked about really some of the core fundamentals that a lot of people miss. And really all that other stuff is what you can get lost in. So rather than focusing on all the stuff you don't know yet and getting lost in it, focus on these two, I think more or less two things we kind of talked about here is like your online presence and your audience.
Yep.
And I can't stress that enough. And I mean, and one thing I wanted to mention about it too, and I'm sure you probably would have got to this if we had more time, authenticity. People crave authenticity. People can smell BS. And so if you're not being authentic, or if you're switching what you do all the time just to try to please who you think you need to please, it's not going to work out. You're going to expend a lot of energy and you're going to end up disappointing people. But if you are authentic to who you are and own that, you will really, especially as a brick and mortar business, you will never really have competition. Mm-hmm. If you are uniquely, just because there's two coffee shops in one place, and we know this too, the same thing, we'll just go ahead and say it because I'd like to give Buckhead a shout out too. We've been talking about Muletown this whole time. I love Buckhead too. And Buckhead and Muletown are very two distinctive coffee shops. Mm-hmm. You could say they're in competition because they both sell coffee, but they're completely different experiences when you go in there.
Yep.
And very different in terms of the way that they come off. And
they,
so the more that they own themselves, the more they don't compete. And that's really, it's a win-win. I feel like going to Buckhead today because I want, a sandwich or some treats or, something else. And then you go to Muletown because it's a different experience. So I don't know, that's my 2 cents too, is just like, make sure you're being authentic. Don't try to please the customers that you think are out there. Please the ones you talk to, that we talked about that. But stay authentic to who you are and own that, because that's what people want and need.
Yeah, and if I can share one other tip, just off of that, just made me think of this, is just that avoid the comparison trap in terms of like, it's actually really healthy and good to compare yourself to yourself yesterday or yourself last week or yourself last year. Yeah. That kind of comparison is really good. That's healthy.
Yeah.
But comparing yourself to other businesses that are either in other cities or in the exact same city, they've been there longer, or they've been there shorter and they're trying a different perspective, you can get lost kind of trying to like chase different directions. Mm-hmm. It's best if you just focus on growing yourself and your business year by year by year. I mean, everyone knows. I mean, like the research is so many businesses fail every year that you need to be playing the long game. You need to be thinking, what do I need to do today so that 5 years from now I've got a really healthy, thriving business. Yeah,
and if you're changing your message all the time or what your brand is, people are going to be confused. If you stick with what's authentically you, the only direction it's going to go in is a clearer version of that.
Yep. So exactly.
Cool. This was good stuff. I'm glad we didn't. I love the fact that I never plan these, and we always find something really important to talk about for small business. And audience is huge. Audience online, audience offline, doesn't matter. Same thing. It's the people who you are broadcasting to, and you're asking for their dollars.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being on the show, John. I really appreciate it. We're definitely have to do this again. There's a wealth of knowledge that I know you have that I'd like to share with the audience. But where can people find out about what you're up to now, or is there anything upcoming that you'd like to share, anything like that?
Yeah, well, if you go to platformuniversity.com, you can learn about the training we have there. I mean, it is primarily for digital brands, for personal brands, for online stuff. But you can actually use a personal brand to promote your brick and mortar business.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, that's a well, practiced and technique that works pretty well. So that's where you can find. That's honestly where I spend most of my time. You can of course go to johnmeese.com and learn about me and my family, what I'm up to. But these days, most of my attention is platformuniversity.com. Keeps me busy.
Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you so much for tuning in, those of you who tuned into this episode. If you have any kind of questions or you would like to perhaps be interviewed on my podcast, whether you're local or you're across the world, I'd be happy to talk to you. If you have something of value to share with a small business audience, you can shoot me an email, danny@dannycoleman.me, and you can find me on social media at I am Danny Coleman. I appreciate 5-star reviews, but I'll take any kind of review. I love that honest feedback. And yeah, hope you guys have an excellent rest of your day. Thank you, John, for being on. We'll see you all later.
Want more? Go to DannyColeman.me to download Danny's free small business hiring guide, which includes tips, templates, and tools, plus a step-by-step process you can use to find and keep high-quality employees for your small team or business.